Hey. Oh, we're not echoing?
I'm not.
All right. Well, welcome back to the Pop Culture SquadCast, everyone, on a clean and good entry. Okay.
I just figured out why I've been counting backwards for the last month or two. From like 30, I go backwards now.
Oh, yeah, I wonder. Maybe it has something to do with this. I don't know. We got to figure out some stuff. We're getting better.
Yeah.
All right. So it is April 18th. It is tax day. It is also the 85th anniversary of the first appearance of Superman.
An unrelated incident.
They are unrelated.
Yeah.
I want to talk about Superman a little bit. When you've told the story about, let me just bring this in here. Let me talk about this. Here we go.
Oh.
There we go. Let's see if we make it. There we go. So, 85 years ago, this happened. It's been repeated all the other times in other places. But when you came on board at DC for the first time, you had told me that part of your responsibilities had something to do with the Superman movie.
Oh, yeah.
And I'd like you to talk about that, but also I want to give you a little bit of frame of reference in that is probably my first experience with Superman, because I was it 77 or 78?
78.
Okay, well, I was 6 then, and I wasn't really reading comic books by that point. Maybe there were Super Friends, but that was really my first experience with Superman, and subsequently came lots more. But what was your experience and involvement in that movie and making that movie?
Let's see. I had a lot of experiences there, but I spent a day and a half with Marty Pasco and Christopher Reeve.
What did Marty have to do with it?
Well, Marty was writing Superman at the time.
Okay.
And so Christopher had never read Superman. Mm-hmm. He had never seen it on television. Or let alone the serials. His familiarity with the character was more as a piece of Americana. So he had a lot of questions. He'd been doing his homework, but he had a lot of questions about what went into Superman, who he was, and why he was, and how he came about, and how he changed over the years. They were phenomenal questions. I think I don't want to say they made Marty a better writer in that Marty wasn't a good writer. Marty was a brilliant writer. But, over the course of that period of time, we had to sort of reevaluate everything to put it in some sort of order for this newbie. Now, Christopher was the sweetest, nicest, funniest guy around. Everything you heard about him as being a nice guy is true. His questions, Marty and I both were used to those types of questions. Marty was a trained stage actor and director. And I've, sort of had the Second City thing and other stuff like that, and the radio thing. And, I've been fairly skilled in performance art. So I know the background. I know why he wanted to know that. And we had just the most intensely fascinating conversation for, like I said, about a day and a half. And then shortly after that, Steve Mitchell and I spent a day with Donner and Mankiewicz talking about, everything, but mostly talking about the script. They didn't really use a lot from Mario Puzo's well-paid-for original draft. Mm-hmm. They used some, but Donner.
Did that make it into? I haven't finished the offer, but did that make it into the offer?
Into the offer.
The show. There's you haven't seen the show, The Offer.
Oh no, I haven't. No, I haven't.
Need to see that.
What is The Offer? Tell me about this.
Oh, well, The Offer is about the making of what went into the making of The Godfather, like the beginning, from the beginnings.
Yes, I know what you're talking about now. I know what you're talking about. Yeah,
it's one of Howard's favorites.
It would be.
Of course.
It sounds like it would be, at least. And I just took a gaze at Howard's Lois Lane just a few minutes ago. Really nice Rosalind Russell approach. Mindy Newell said it looked like Rosalind Russell.
Okay, I'll give you that.
And knowing Chaykin, yeah, probably. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I never met Mr. Puzo. He was gone by the time I got there, by the time the movie was actually being done seriously, prepared for filming. But the conversation that we had with Donner and Mankiewicz was similar to that we had with Christopher, but it was much deeper in terms of the motivations, the actual who the hell is Superman and why the hell is he doing this weird stuff, as opposed to an actor who wants enough material so that he can complete that sentence. Fascinating. Great time. Had a wonderful time with them all. Christopher and I became, pretty friendly. I mean, he was all over the world filming Superman, but in each country they set up their own company, the producers, sure, so that they could say they never turned a profit. I know they were kind of sleazy. Nonetheless, I was there for shooting a lot of stuff. I was up in Alberta for the Smallville stuff. Met Kirk Allen, which was wonderful. Partially because I know who Kirk Allen was. Mm-hmm. I knew that he did movies with the Lone Ranger. He did all kinds of just wonderful stuff. He played Blackhawk in what is unfortunately one of the worst movie serials ever made.
And he was really he played.
Unfortunate.
Is that the guy who played his father? Is that who that was? I don't know.
Chris.
Kirk Allen.
No, Kirk Allen. He played in the Superman movie. He played just a guy who happened to be on the train whizzing by Alberta, along with Noel Neill, which was also cool because Noel Neill was in those serials that with Allen, and then of course later on in the TV show. So after the first season, I think, or so. It was absolutely fascinating, and she wound up in one of the Superman movies later on.
I didn't know that there was a Blackhawk serial or movie.
It's a serial. I think it's 15 chapters. It was done by Columbia at a point in time when they were at their financial lowest, and at their height. Their financial heights were pretty low. It was a cheap operation, and Blackhawk suffered from it because the whole serial thing was going out the window in those days. They didn't need serials. They didn't put a lot of money into them. They didn't get a lot of money, make a lot of money off of them. Kirk looked great as Blackhawk, and that's the only thing worthwhile.
Okay, that's fair. So how did you get this opportunity? Like, how did Mike Gold, publicity guy for DC, the first publicity guy for DC, get to be the one to walk around and go all over the world making this movie?
Well, I didn't go all over the world. Canada is still like in this hemisphere.
It's not this country.
Well, see, that's absolutely true, and they'll be the first to tell you that, as they should, because Americans tend to treat Canada as an extension of America. The trick to going to Canada is to look at it for the differences, not for the similarities.
Oh, yeah.
And you'll have a much better time because you'll see all this neat stuff you wouldn't have seen otherwise.
Yeah.
So I'm partial to that. But nonetheless, I mean, probably the most fun I had with the movie, working on the movie, and I will answer your question eventually.
Yeah.
Is happened in New York on 57th Street, which is a major arterial street running through Manhattan. It also runs over a fault line, so someday it's going to break off right there at 57th Street.
Nice.
And sure. There's this building. You'll see it in the movie because Superman is hanging out the window from that movie. Mm-hmm. When they were shooting it, it was late at night, and because they had to be dark, and Christopher was suspended from wires for about 2-3 hours. I mean, it was remarkable. He was just and you could feel that had to be painful and stuff. So he recognizes me from the street. He was about 10 stories up. "Hey, Mike," he goes. And we're chatting, and because I'm only like 28 at the time, 27 at the time, I'm still kind of a prick. So I said still. So I asked him, like, what happens if you have to go to the bathroom? And Christopher said, "Oh, damn, I wish you didn't say that." Probably the second most fun moment I had on the set was also in New York, but it was on 42nd Street when they were filming outside of the old New York Daily News building, which was used as the Daily Planet building because it had a big ass planet in the lobby, which I think it still does.
Does that building still have that?
Oh, yeah, I think so. I haven't been in it, but I think it does. Okay. Last time I was
they wouldn't have moved it to the new building?
Oh no, because they don't have a new building. They just rent offices like other newspapers across America now.
I remember when that building was going up. I thought that was their building.
It's a nice building.
It is a nice building.
Anyway, if you're into Art Deco, as I am, nonetheless, that's when the blackout of 1977 happened.
Mm-hmm.
And we were a little late to know it. Just a little late, because the movie crew had their own generators. So we had all these big, Klieg lights on the street. And after a while, we noticed that people were coming to them and going, "Oh, look, they've got light." And at first, I'm thinking, 27-year-old brat, I'm thinking, well, of course we have light. We're making a movie here. What I didn't realize was the rest of America did not. Or no, that's not true. But the rest of New York and quite a lot of America did not.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was fun.
Let's see. So I think I did. We didn't lose power where I was. I was down the shore by then. I don't think that was part of. I don't think we got affected by that.
Just wait.
Oh no, I was there for. I was there in 2003. I was in the blackout of 2003. I was in the Paramount Plaza for 3 days. I didn't leave the 48th floor of the Paramount Plaza.
No kidding.
Yeah, because I was working. I was working on the 30th floor. The lights went out. The power went out at 4:12. I was working in a brokerage house. So like 4:00, the market's closed. But I ran from 30th floor to the 48th floor, which is the top floor of the Paramount Plaza, and I spent the rest of the night and the next night trying to figure out how to get stuff to work. And I left at this was Thursday, so at 6:00 on Saturday morning, I finally left.
I think that was the blackout that caught my wife and daughter on the road coming back from Long Island.
Okay.
when all the street lights were out and it was dark, and all of the stoplights were out, making it even darker. The beautiful thing was, about a half hour before they got home, we got our power back. We got it back. We were one of the first neighborhoods, as opposed to during the 77 blackout, when I lived in one of the last neighborhoods. So, the gods are evening things out. So I was pretty worried about that one. But it was nice to have the power at home for them when they got there.
Yeah.
Anyway, how did I get involved was your question. And I actually remember your question. I got involved because I was running this sort of publicity and marketing thing over at DC, and I was involved in a lot of the cooperative events. And because I'm a Budinsky, I would make little comments. Now, I also interviewed these guys for The Amazing World of DC Comics and a couple of other magazines, but mostly for Amazing World. So it was, which was a wonderful fanzine.
But did you do that?
I wrote for it. I didn't start it.
Was it? It was not. Was that not a DC product?
It was a DC product.
Okay, yeah,
Absolutely, 100%.
it was a DC product. Yes.
So I was working for DC, reporting about how I was working for DC.
Right. Okay.
No,
I
that's how I first got involved. And we did promotions and we did all kinds of stuff. But really, I felt my job was to bring that movie audience, and we knew that would be a year or two away, into the comic books.
You would think that would work.
It worked a bit. It doesn't today, but it worked. It doesn't. It worked a bit. Everybody was expecting another Batman TV show type of response, and we got a phenomenal response to that movie. I had just left DC staff when it was released. But we had a phenomenal response to the movie, and it did help sales, but it wasn't like the Batman TV show.
So the Batman TV show did a lot of sales, even though, interesting.
I think it saved comics completely, and Marvel, by keeping comic books in the drugstores and what was left of the newsstands at that point in time, which is the mid-'60s. Just at the point in time when it became really inefficient to buy, distribute, or make a living off of newsstand comic books. It was just beginning. Right. It was not worth it to the retailers to stock comic books. It was a money loser. And they weren't happy about it, and they didn't like the whole idea of a whole bunch of 9-year-olds coming in and laying all over their drugstores reading comic books. So, hey, kid, this isn't a library. We know you can't shout in a library. But it was, and I think we had some success with that. But our readers were desperate for any little line of information, and we gave that to them. We gave them everything that we could. This was well before the internet. I think it was before Fire. Actually, it was a long time ago.
Long time ago.
So, it was really part of my job, and it was also one of the best perks I could have had in my job.
That's fantastic. Here's the other part of it. The other part of it is that I want to talk about how you learned or became exposed to Superman. Like, it was obviously through comics, right? Wasn't it? Or was it the serials, or...
No, I'm not quite that old, but I'm old enough
to... Or the TV show. The TV show.
I was old enough to have experienced it from the TV show. I didn't watch a lot of television when I was a little kid. My parents loved it. My sister loved it. But Superman was up against cartoons. My sister was 7 years older than me. I wanted to watch cartoons. And she would throw a major hissy fit if she couldn't watch Superman. However, she was also a comic book reader. And when she had to babysit me, she would read me her comic books. And I learned how to read at a ridiculously precocious age. I think I was still in the womb or something. And that's where I first experienced Superman. So I knew by the time I saw him on TV when I was like 4 or 3 or something, that this was a comic book guy. So it was a pretty cool way to grow up, actually. I was already familiar with Superman. And then, of course, a few years later when George Reeves died, everybody turned to me and said, well, I guess Superman's dead. And I said, no, it's a comic book character. So this little, like, 8-year-old or something was, like, telling people, no, he's not dead. He didn't live to begin with. I said, yes, he's dead. And the newspaper said he's dead. I love kids. They're so full of themselves. And that's probably a good thing.
Well, so, as I said, it was first, I think it was the movie, it was the first time I saw it, and then, and probably, Super Friends. And then I remember reading comics. And when I was growing up, and when I started reading comics, I started reading New Teen Titans. I started reading X-Men. So I was reading the younger characters before I started reading the adult characters. But I think it's not the first story, but the first story, Superman story I remember reading, as it came out, that just blew me away was Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow.
Oh yeah. Well, that's a good one to blow you away.
Yeah, I mean, it was the end of the first volume of Superman, and it was at the end of, it was right around the time of Crisis happened, and they were going to start him over with Byrne. But like that, it was such an important story, I think, because, I mean, obviously it's considered one of the greatest stories of all time. Well, everybody knows that. But I think one of the things that makes it that way is that he brought everything together. He brought all that would have 50 years of DC, I guess, by that point. Was it 50? Somewhere around there. Almost 50.
Yeah.
I think it was almost 50. Together, years of Superman into one two-issue story that kind of put him away and was able to kind of close that chapter. I think that was the most impressive part of it.
He did Alan Moore was the writer, and
right.
I think it's one of the few things he hasn't taken his name off of. I could be wrong about that, though. It was Kurt Swan's sort of swan song.
True,
but it's true. It was his swan song on Superman, more or less, and certainly as a regular artist.
The other Kurt inked it. Am I right about
Kurt
that?
Schaffenberger.
Yeah.
That's my recollection, but I'm not 100% certain.
I'm not either, but I think it was.
Yeah, they were a great team. But anybody in Kurt were a great team. I can't think of a really bad inker that he ever had.
My understanding is he didn't like Murphy inking him.
That's possible. Carmine didn't, but Murphy and Carmine Infantino did not like each other personally.
Right.
So that kind of spilled over into it. I don't know. Kurt actually used to live near me, about 2 miles from where I am right now. And we shopped at the same comic book store. It was he was a very, very nice man. He did a panel for me, the Golden Age panel, at a convention. I hosted a lot of Golden Age panels. This time I had Gil Kane with me, and Gil Kane was Mr. Quality Comics. So I knew that if I ever needed to reach for anything, I had Gil there, and all I had to say was something like, Doll Man, and then that was it. He'd run with it.
Right.
But
right.
Kurt shows up at the panel late. I have Marty Nogel, who created Green Lantern with Bill Finger, and Marty Nogel and Marty Nogel. I'm blocking the artist. the guy who did the cover and I think did the costume design. It'll come to me. And it's really bothering me because he was like the major Batman ghost of the 50s. They were both on the panel and they hated each other because Marty thought that he was ripped off on Green Lantern. And Kurt Swan shows up late to the panel, and he's drunk out of his mind. And he's swearing like a sailor. By the way, I don't know that sailors really swear that much. But he was swearing like you wouldn't, they might as well. Totally drunk. And after he ranted for about 10 minutes, what seemed like 10 minutes, I played my Gil Kane card, to get off of that. Then finally, Kurt sobers up enough to realize that he just made a horrible mistake and he was profoundly embarrassed, and he starts apologizing all the time. And I go, no, look, Kurt, relax. We understand what you've been through. After all, he had been the Superman artist, and now he was mostly unemployed. And, this was his first real big convention, I think, after all of that happened. So I just said, Kurt, I think I'm speaking for everybody in the audience here by saying it was just worth it just to hear the guy who drew Superman for half a century say fuck so much. And we got off of that way. It was sort of a nice way to get off of that. So that's not my takeaway from Superman, but Superman. I've been with Superman through thick and thin my entire life. I mean, literally since I was at 2 years old. Which is longer than I've been with Fantastic Four, and I bought the first issue of that off the stands.
Sure. I mean, exactly. He's 85. He's older than Reed, even though
he's older than me.
Well, true. Older than me too, but he also doesn't look old. I also look older than him too. So there's that.
Well, he never gained weight.
Well, he did not.
Lois did. Lois gained a lot of weight for her first cover, I think.
Is that the
where Superman's flying with her and she weighs like 3 tons?
Yeah, one of those beautiful gimmick stories from the 50s.
That's all Mort Weisinger did in the first half of the 60s.
Just all gimmicks.
Just dumb gimmick stories. A few were brilliant.
Some are awful.
Oh, and many are awful. Particularly when you get to some of those later Jimmy Olsen and Lois Lane stories. It was beautifully drawn, Kurt Schaffenberger, and that beautiful pillbox hat. But they treated Lois like shit. Mm-hmm. Which is why I sent Chaikin's Lois Lane to Mindy Newell a half hour ago, because Mindy wrote Lois Lane and did not treat her like shit. It was one of the first stories where she became completely 100% an interesting and important character.
Yeah, I agree. I will say they've done a lot better job with her in the past decade for sure, and probably longer. But
I think we have the movie.
Margot. You think Margot?
I think Margot. So. Margot helped set the tone, but also everybody involved in the movie, by giving her really interesting bits, but never undermining the fact that she was the greatest reporter to ever walk the earth. She didn't know how to spell, and that's a bit they picked up in the comics, and nobody cared that she didn't know how to spell because she was such a brilliant reporter. I like that bit more than anything. And the idea in the first Superman movie of her falling out a window, which is what she pretty much did for a living in the comic books throughout the 40s and 50s, and Superman catches her, Superman says, "I've got you." And Lois has the presence of mind while plummeting to her death and being saved by a caped flying man to say, "You've got me, who's got you?"
One of the greatest lines.
One of the greatest lines, absolutely. And
Well,
it said so much about Lois.
Yeah. So we have both of our guests are now here in the green room. So we're gonna transition away from Superman's 85th birthday, but we might get these guys to talk about it too, and talk about a new Kickstarter that's going on right now. It is called Boris Karloff and the Gold Key Mysteries, and we're gonna bring in first the writer. Because we do this alphabetically, so Michael Conrad is going to come first. He's had a whole nother career before becoming a full-time comic writer, and has exploded in the last few years. His Double Walker, which if you haven't read yet, I'll get you. You need to read it. It's one of the best books that I read last year. With Noah Bailey was on the art with that. He's also been the writer on Wonder Woman and Batgirls. Is currently working on Exo Manowar with his writing partner Becky Cloonan. And Liam Sharp art, which is fantastic. So let's bring him in.
Whoa,
Michael, how are you?
You look great on a black background.
Oh, don't I just, this is where I write. I write in an unfinished basement in a little corner. So it's kind of perfect for working on stuff like Karloff. And
Yeah. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I was enjoying listening to the Superman conversation because just like everyone in comics should be, I'm a big Superman fan, and I owe a huge debt of gratitude to the Boy in Blue. So
Sure.
yeah,
Absolutely.
I had a couple opportunities to write Superman in my short time at DC, and I hope to have some more in the future. But yeah, I was loving what you all had to say about. I kind of wanted to just hang out in the green room longer and.
Well, you missed the
guys-
early stuff when he was talking about being on the movie set and stuff.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go back. I didn't realize that you all had already started.
No worries at all.
So
What was?
for
Yeah,
content.
that's
We're always on.
that's
We're always on.
and as I've said to Mike, you can put us together in a room and we can go. I can just pull like threads of story out of Mike for hours and hours. So I have one that we didn't get to just because we went on Superman that long. So the next time we'll get to that. Before we bring in Kelly, and we'll do this with Kelly when he comes on. But what was your Superman experience? Just where did you encounter him? And
It's funny. I've been fielding a lot of questions lately about like my comic book origins, and mine are. I guess they aren't super unique. I grew up in a really poor family. I didn't have access to a local shop. I didn't have disposable income.
Mhm.
But at the library, there were these big bound tomes of black and white Superman, super early stuff, and Batman, super early stuff. And that was kind of my first exposure to comics in general. It wasn't the contemporary stuff that was coming out in the late 70s, early 80s of my youth. It was stuff from the dawning of comic books. So I feel like my experience was very much informed by some of the earliest stuff. The first time I remember buying Superman off the racks was maybe with the death of Superman.
Okay.
And of course, I loved that. It was such a spectacle. And I remember my dad would watch all these trashy Current Affair and entertainment television and stuff like that. And all these legitimate news networks were talking about the death of a comic book character with this great reverence. And I realized, like people around the world care about this stuff as much as I do.
It's
Somewhere,
crazy.
You know, there's a kid in a Superman shirt right now who doesn't know anything about the comics, doesn't know anything about the movies or cartoons, but they know what Superman is. They know it's transcended any form of media and has become this super powerful symbol that's recognized world round.
Yeah, that logo, the Superman S, is as recognizable as the Coca-Cola trademark. But the nice thing is these days we've had 4 generations, give or take, of people who were raised with Superman. So everybody, even during the Death of Superman thing, which was around 1990, something like that.
93. It's the I will say it is the 30th anniversary of the Death of Superman this year.
Wow.
I say that because I'm hosting a panel this weekend about the Death of Superman with Roger Stern and Glenn Whitmore.
Oh,
that's a good crew. That's a good crew. Nonetheless, people know who Superman is. And today, people know who comic book people are. When Jack Kirby died, they gave him a whole segment on this ABC Evening News, which amazed me, astonished me. A whole segment, not even just a quick flash, a whole segment. And now when Al Jaffe died, now I recognize the fact that Mad Magazine had a stronger impact on a small group of people who went insane.
But he was on the news.
But Al Jaffe was covered everywhere. Stephen Colbert did a whole tribute to him on his show. You'd think most people don't know who Al Jaffe was. No, they do. They may not know the name, but they knew about certainly the Mad Fold-In and probably the Snappy Answers thing. Comics lost that sense of illegitimacy.
Mostly
I've
due to
tried
the Superman movie.
I have, yes. Well, no, I think that's true. Absolutely. I've done my best to help bring that back, and Michael, I've read your Doom Patrol and stuff.
I was gonna say, I hope that it's not offensive that part of me wants comics to remain somewhat subterranean. At least
Absolutely.
the portion of comics. I love feeling like it's my dirty little secret. I remember a time where I was afraid to show comics to people for fear of being ostracized and made to be in the corner. And I think that still exists in comics. And it's something that I don't want to lose as I dance with these big companies. I never want to lose that kind of the rebel spirit that is best embodied in comics, I think, of most of the mainstream media forms that show up.
That rebel spirit is so critical to all media. I mean, not to straight news reporting, and not to documentaries, but if you're going to be entertained, if you're going to work in fiction, you got to be a bit of a rebel in order to entertain, which means that there are some people you're not going to entertain. They're going to not like you, and you have to be comfortable with that.
Yeah, and that's that was a real discovery in starting to work within the mainstream. You think, oh, if I got a chance to write something that was read broadly, I would be able to get it just right. And then you show up and there's a portion of, a segment of the audience that loves what you do. And then there's a segment that absolutely hates what you do. So this week I've got 3 comic books out. So it's like 3 times the concern that I'm carrying with me all day is, which fan base did I piss off this week?
All of them if you did it right.
Yeah. Ultimately, and it's not out of some sort of callous, self-congratulatory place. You do have to kind of turn off trying to please everyone and really just try and do the best stuff that you can. And I think that's what we see out of the most important creators that have existed in comics. It's been people who really just followed their vision for a character. and made the world keep up with them rather than, trying to please everybody all the time, because then you end up with something that's roundly vanilla and nobody wants that in the end.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I'd rather somebody feel passionate hatred for something I've been involved with than just benign indifference.
Yeah, I'm cool with them not hating it. They can dislike it. It's funny. I don't find myself overly concerned about a public opinion, but I also understand with a lot of the stuff that I do, it's a business, and there's people with checkbooks who are wanting to make sure that money gets returned to that bank account so that they can keep writing checks. So that, it's project to project. You look at it in different ways, and some of the stuff, like certainly at DC, I can't do all the stuff that I want to do over there. There's too much oversight. There's too much concern. You got people in marketing who are worried about selling plushie toys or Funko Pops, and you have to do stuff that's consistent with the vision of marketing as well as standards and practices. Your editor, what's capable on the publishing schedule, what gets greenlit. There's a lot of factors that keep us from getting to that cool moment where you wake up and you're like, oh, I'm Tom King and I can probably do whatever I want now. So that's a rarefied air. But we see what happens when you give people that room. You get incredible books. You get stuff that's unlike anything else on the shelves. So
yes, and that's why we're here. We're here to blow people away.
Right.
He didn't wake up that way. I mean, I've known him since the very beginning, and he, it took him a while to get the trust and notoriety that he has, that he can.
I feel like I've known him longer than I have known him because I listened to a podcast that he was on way back in the day. So I feel like I've really been on the ride with him. And you're right. I shouldn't characterize it like no one wakes up being like, oh, and now I've got the keys to the kingdom.
Some people do. Some people do, but.
Yeah, you want to name names?
No,
but in corporate America,
when we can do this together, maybe.
Yeah, right.
When corporate America is running things, even if they're not making money, and there's not a lot of money to be made in publishing comic books, you could be the biggest guy on the block. You could be the best writer, the best artist, and have the rug pulled out from underneath you at any given moment for bullshit bureaucratic reasons, sometimes for good reasons, but not very often. So it's still a high wire act. If you want to do what you want to do and you want to do it great, most of the bigger publishers manage to get rid of people like me. Who would fight to the death for the talent to execute their artistic vision, which is why we hired them in the first place.
Right.
Yeah.
We didn't hire them to lobotomize their work, but you'd have a hard time telling sometimes.
Well, I want to. I don't want to keep Kelly too long. I mean, I'm sure he's probably over there He's in the green room and he's just he's drawing and his hands are getting blacker by the second. So let's bring him in.
He's earning a living.
Kelly Williams is an artist who's been on fire recently. It's just like Michael. His book's Bountiful Garden, The Life and Death of the Brave Captain Suave. I think it's Suave. I don't think it's Swove or anything else like that. River of Sin was a TKO book. A Letter to Joe was fantastic. He's contributed to a number of anthologies as well, including Boris Karloff and the Cold Key Mysteries, which we're going to be talking about very soon. So let's bring in Kelly Williams. Oh.
And he's not there.
He's here.
Okay.
He is here.
Okay.
Yay.
Hey, Kelly.
Hey,
how are you?
Kelly.
Hey.
Thanks for listening.
It was good. It was fun.
So, well, since we're on the topic, let's get to it. So, what is the story behind the Gold Key resurgence? If you guys have any insight on that, there's a Kickstarter coming along, and people can go into the comments section or wherever they're watching this, and the link to the Kickstarter is going to be there. And it ends, I think, within about a week or so. We're getting close. How did that come about? Do you guys have any insight on that?
Yeah, I'll go first. Kelly, stop me if I'm rambling on too long. I'm counting on you. I was at WonderCon maybe 2 years ago, and this gentleman came up and he just pointed at a bunch of my self-published zines. I made one specifically called "The Strange Disappearance of Robert Lau." This one right here, which is just something that I wrote and drew, and it's about a guy who's he's finding stuff growing out of his fingers, and he's picking away at it, trying to figure out what's stuck under his skin. It's really gross, and it was kind of a way for me to channel my medical paranoia that was happening around the first shutdown for COVID. So it was kind of a personal thing and just a weird little horror short. And that was among the things that he picked up from me. And as he was walking away, he threw a card down and was like, "Hey, thanks. I'm going to follow up on this." I picked up the card, and the card had the Gold Key logo on it. And I was like, "What the hell is it? What's this all about?" Flipped it over, and it said, Gold Key Comics LLC. So I shouted at the guy, "Hey, stop! Where are you? What is this?" And he's like, "We're back, baby!" And just I gotta go. and he was gone. So immediately when I get home from WonderCon, I emailed him and I said, what's the meaning of this? What happened? And of course I did my own Google snooping, and I found that this weird guy had come up on a copy of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles #1 first pressing, which I don't know what that's worth. Maybe a million? I don't know. A lot of money.
I've heard. So keep going, but I'm excited because I do know this story because I had dinner with Steve Orlando one night and he told me this story. So continue.
Oh, cool. Steve might have gotten the story from me.
Okay,
so
it's possible.
Maybe you've got the game of telephone version.
That's awesome. That's even better. That's what we.
Here. So he ends up trading this comic for the license, for the branding essentially for Gold Key. But it wasn't like it came with Turok and Solar Man of the It didn't come with anything. And they independently brokered a deal with the Karloff estate to do this book. And initially they were coming to me. I didn't realize it, but based on this zine, they were coming to me because they were thinking about asking me to be on their art staff. They didn't know that I was a writer. So I was like, "Hey, man, I write stuff, over at DC, and I've got my own creator-owned stuff." I sent over a bunch of things. I said, I like to draw, but I don't think I'm the guy that you want for that. I got somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And I already had in my mind, I want to get Kelly in on this because I had been kind of dancing with Kelly about doing something for far too long. And it was just trying to find a place where I could offer Kelly an equitable page rate. Anyway, so they were like, "Do you want to do your own thing or do you want to do something for Karloff?" And I said, "I 100% want to do something for Karloff because I'm a horror fan. Horror anthologies are right up my alley. A big part of, I had mentioned that I came up poor. One of the ways that poor people read comics is to pick up a Tales from the Crypt or a Creepy or whatever, because it's a bunch of one and done stories. I'm not going to have to track down X-Men number 235 and 236 and keep doing this big deal. Yeah, there's the cover. Look at that. So when they brought me on to do Karloff, we plugged in with Kelly immediately and hit the ground running. Now the thing that that was important to me was making sure that as many of the creators that contribute to this are able to retain their rights to the material that they make. That can get really tricky when you're dealing with licensed IP, particularly the likeness of Karloff. So we came up with kind of a way for the people that are contributing the interstitial stories in this anthology to be able to do it independent of having Karloff be present. So Karloff isn't showing up in stories being like, hey, I'm the crypt keeper. My name's Boris Karloff instead. Kelly and I handle that part. So there's bumpers to each issue. The front and back end are this ongoing story about Boris Karloff, where he's been, what he's been doing. I know you think he died in 1969. That's not the case. And we're here to tell you of what he's been up to during that time. And this allows the stories that live in between those to be ultimately something that the creative teams will be able to retain and potentially print again elsewhere in the future, or if something happens with the license, Gold Key will be able to collect those stories at least and continue to present those in an ongoing manner.
Oh, that's great.
Good move.
So Kelly, how was your when Michael brought this to you? What were you thinking?
Well, I talked to the editor, Zane, first.
Oh.
Zane is to give a little background on Zane. I met Zane while we were doing this book, which was another Kickstarter book, Big Hype 2, and he was assigned to me randomly as an editor. And I just loved him so much that when I got going at Karloff, I was like, you got to let me pick the editor. That's how Zane got involved. Anyway, keep going. Sorry, I'm terrible about
he actually asked me if I wanted to pitch some short stories for it, and I was like, sure. So I sent a couple things over, and then they asked if I would want to do the work with Michael and do the main wraparound story thing. And I was like, sure. I'm just going to not focus on you passing up my story. I'll take my consolation prize and I'll move on. No, it was super cool. Like, especially considering I just kind of threw these short stories at him, and for them to come back and bring up doing that. And when he said Michael was writing it, I was like, this is perfect, because like you said, we've been talking about trying to do something for a while now, so it just kind of all worked out, and there we are.
So, for people who are going to back the Kickstarter, there's this book that they're going to receive, which we mentioned, this Boris Karloff and the Gold Key Mysteries. And in there are now what you've told us, and I'm correct me if I just want to make sure we got this. There is a connecting story that you guys are working on, but then there are separate, different stories that are inside of this. And it's like, how many stories are in this first issue? Do you know?
There's 3 stories in the first issue.
Mm-hmm.
There's the framing story. And then there's a story from Craig Hurd McKinney, who's a great friend of mine, someone that I met at a show in Cleveland. I think that's an image from his story. Mm-hmm. With the artist Jock, not Jock of Batman fame. Different.
No, there's only one. There's minus a C.
Yeah, J-O-K. He's fantastic. He's working on a book with Layman at Image now, so we're lucky that we got him kind of in the pocket to be able to be free to do this project. And then there's a story from Steve Orlando.
Is that this one? I think this is this one, right?
Let me see.
Or is this yours? No,
That's the same one.
Oh, same story.
Is it? I don't know. I can't tell. It's so small. Or wait, no. I think maybe that one was.
Yeah, the clapping one was from from Steve Orlando's story.
Right. That's fine.
I still haven't even seen the completed version of this.
All right.
Whoa.
Well, that was what we were supposed to talk about. We'll get to that another day. So there's cool stuff.
Yeah. So with this, it's pretty much the Gold Key guys were like, "Hey, we're going to trust you to kind of curate this thing," which has kind of been one of the more exciting elements of the project for me, is being able to lightweight show run it and be able to incorporate friends of mine. Steve, I know from where we did a bunch of shows together, and we've worked on the same characters.
Sure.
There's been a lot of overlap in our careers. So we became fast friends. And like I said, I met Craig at a show in Cleveland years ago, and I've become really great friends with him. So it was really, it was challenging because I know a lot of really talented people and people that certainly deserve space in the pages of Karloff, but we wanted this first issue to be these particular teams, and we're really excited about the different approaches that everyone has taken to it. I think it's going to be, there's definitely something, even though there's only 3 stories and something that's being marketed as an anthology, I think people will be thankful that we've afforded the page lengths that we have to these various stories. The book itself is over 30 pages, so that's like 10 plus pages per creative team. So it's not, 4 pages in and out and then onto us prattling on about Karloff somewhere.
Right.
There's a lot of room to breathe with these stories.
So what's the plan going forward after this first, issue is completed and funded? I mean, obviously it's funded, but where are we gonna go with it?
It funded pretty quickly, and now we're looking at stretch goals and stuff like that. And with that additional money, it's going to allow us a greater budget moving forward and looking at who's going to be in the next issue and such. So kind of the plan is with wrapping the Kickstarter soon, we want to be able to deliver on that really quickly. We don't want to be one of those Kickstarters where it's like, hey, I backed it, and 2 years later a mystery package shows up. Sure. And you're like, oh, I must have backed that when I was drunk back in '98, and now here it is finally.
That's never happened to me.
Yeah, I've got unopened Kickstarters because I'm like, I don't know what this is.
I know it's sober.
So, and then there will be the direct market release of Karloff, which, for those of you who aren't in a financial place to be able to get in and back the campaign right now, you will have the opportunity to have this same book. It'll just be the less fancy direct market version. It won't be the collectible with a slipcase and all the bells and whistles. So with the second issue, I know we want to keep the publishing schedule strong. We want it to be as close to what you would see from the bigger publishers kind of schedule as possible. I don't know if they intend to crowdfund every issue. If I had my druthers, they wouldn't, and it would just be, okay, this one was a special thing, and now we're just going to lean into the direct market. But I don't know. That's really outside of my purview. I do know that I'm done with the next 3 issues. So Excellent. If they don't do the next 3 issues, I'll be sorely disappointed. And if we don't get to 6, then I'll be a little less disappointed. But it won't be the full first arc of Karloff that I'm hoping to get to.
Good. Yeah. That's awesome. So
I don't want to make any false promises, but
no. Wait, listen.
Being ongoing,
we also talked about the things getting pulled out from under people as well. So we don't want that to happen. We want it to go. So and Kelly, how did you approach this this project? Like when it, obviously it was brought to you and you're like, hey, I want to do it. But what type of work did you do to, before you did it and in the process of it? How did that go for you?
Well, it was.
I mean, you've been super busy with a lot of stuff too.
Yeah.
Which is great.
It was stressful as it should be, since I'm having to draw Karloff and all that kind of stuff. And I know that it has to be approved by the estate and all that. So I once I got past the panic over that, like I spent a lot of time working on just finding my way of drawing him. There were a couple characters that we kind of wanted to flesh out visually before I jumped into it, so that they had their look. Then there's a whole prop that like a whole house thing I had to go in and figure out the different things about. I'm also trying not to give stuff away.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Right.
That's cool.
Yeah,
It's a tricky path.
The book has mystery in the name,
Sure.
mysteries. So it's we've been really confronting this in interviews that we've done, where there's so many tricky things where if we say one wrong word, we've given away a bunch of stuff. I think people are going to really appreciate the degree to which Kelly has really imagined. I'll say it. There's a house that plays a significant role in our story. And Kelly's really gone through and done a full layout of this house, even though this house is it's a set piece where we aren't going to see every little room and nook and cranny, Kelly, but Kelly knows his way around the house, has built this house in his mind, and now it's a place that we have access to in a way that's much more effective for me as a writer to know, okay, this is how the house is laid out. This is what I've got to work with. So I think beyond the character designs and stuff, Kelly, you also are approaching this with a real organic quality that I love so much. You're painting it, correct?
Yeah.
Yes,
I am. I can show you pages if you want. I'm sure there's something I can show that doesn't give anything away. I don't know.
I'd love to see whatever you got.
What were you were going to say something, Mike, while he's doing that?
Mm-hmm.
I thought you were going to say something about it.
Oh, me? Yeah, I'm always ready to talk about God knows anything. My curiosity comes in whether Kelly has had any architectural training or exposure.
Well, let me answer that with my one thing that always sticks in my mind about the house. It's multiple floors. It's a very large house. I went through and did all this stuff, and then once I finished and sent it over, for everybody to see, I realized I made one small bathroom in a back corner of the bottom floor, or the main floor. That's it. There's no other bathroom in the entire house.
That sounds perfect for storytelling. For storytelling, that really sounds perfect. I had the privilege of, and it really was a privilege, of working with Marshall Rogers. And Marshall was trained as an architectural artist, and you could see that in his work. And I've seen him do similar stuff to what you've talked about. He would design the environment, the buildings, to help fill a psychological need he had to visually tell the story. And it worked beautifully. And it worked with Batman. So that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
The only problem is I kind of forgot to tell Kelly that the house changes shape routinely. So all that hard work that he did, we'll be doing it again with issue 2 and 3 and 4 and everyone forward. Sorry,
fine.
Kelly.
Build that into the Patreon.
Also, we're gonna be. It's the next issue is all cars and horses.
Oh, great.
Good.
Kelly, can you show us a page?
Yeah. So, I'm trying to find something that's more than just talking heads, but doesn't give anything away.
You have to find a different writer if you want pages like that.
Well, this is one. This is not going to be the best way to see these, I'm sure, but
Oh wow!
let's
Yeah,
just say
it
that's all
works.
on the page.
Yeah.
Works for me. You got my interest.
Yeah,
That's what it's supposed to do, right?
Yeah, I would think.
Fantastic.
I would hope. But yeah, so the painting, I actually had decided that I was probably done painting comics until it's either my own personal project, something I just really, really want to do, or it just pays appropriately for that. And, I like to say that, but I know that's never going to happen. So, but yeah, this is one of those things that when it was brought up, because like Zane said something to me about wanting the watercolor thing, and I paused for a second, but I felt like it would really be worth it for this. So, and I'm glad I did. Like,
Well,
it's a little more work, but it's fine.
it is. You may say that, but it's something that I just totally enjoy about your work, and just the way that there's this creepiness. We're gonna get to some horror stuff, but there's this creepiness to the way that you paint that just is intoxicating. So I appreciate it.
Thank you.
One of the we did have a question. I want to bring it in. I want to acknowledge Joe's question here, and I kind of want to. It's something we were going to get to, and I want to mention it. And we're talking about horror stories, and I want you guys to think about what like the first horror stories were. But before that, I want Mike. What is your recollection or remembrance of Karloff and that type of and horror movies in general that we're celebrating with this Kickstarter?
Probably my first real exposure to it was in the very first issue of Forey Ackerman's Famous Monsters. I was the exact right age. I was like 8 years old, and I didn't know there were movies like this. Keep in mind that back in those days, we had, if you were lucky and you lived in a big city, you might have had 4, maybe 5 TV stations. And they all went off the air around 1 o'clock in the morning. So there wasn't quite as much need for cheap filler material on television. So I was probably about 11, 12 years old before I was exposed to the classic horror movies, to the Universal stuff. But I'd already heard of Boris Karloff. His name was synonymous with horror. And then he had that Thriller TV show, which was really good. Before that, he had a TV show where he played this sort of British mystery solver guy, which is very related. So I became a fan of Karloff's before I really got into the horror genre. And when I first saw Frankenstein, it blew me away. When I saw Bride of Frankenstein, which I think is a better movie, not putting down the first, that was it. I became a big fan, particularly of Boris Karloff's. And I've seen his other work, his non-horror work, his earlier work, and he's a hell of an actor. So I'm excited that you guys are doing this, but not just because it's cool and it's a venue that we need desperately, the anthology horror comic done sort of along the lines of the way Warren did it back in the good old days, or even EC before that. You're keeping Boris Karloff's name alive. you're putting Boris Karloff's name in front of an audience, some of whom don't know who he was, and some of them will be inspired to check it out. So you guys are doing good cultural history work, maybe inadvertently, but probably not.
There's been a lot of research that's gone into this because we are dealing with the Karloff estate. We're dealing with Sarah Karloff, his only child, who is now, a vodka drinking, just incredible elder woman who the Gold Key guy.
I would love to meet her. I almost did. So I mean,
I had an invite to go, and it didn't fit in my schedule. I had kind of a deadline crunch, but the Gold Key guys went and hung out with her and said she was just delightful, and I will probably regret that to my dying day that I didn't make that a priority. But what I have done is I've made a priority researching Karloff and making sure that I do her right, get her dad's legacy right, and that includes not just going back and rewatching all the stuff that I've loved, but also watching the stuff that I've missed, and also just reading about the man's life and his great contributions, not just to entertainment, but also, he was one of the founding charter members of SAG, so he's responsible for
it's very true.
People getting proper treatment in the workplace. There's little things about him that I just love so much. Like, I love the fact he's called Boris Karloff, which is a stage name. He took that stage name because he didn't want to embarrass his family. It's like, man, Boris Karloff had imposter syndrome too. It's just
William Henry Pratt. Do I have that right?
To me, yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
And I love that he's got British and Canadian roots, but is also, deeply American. So he's like, wow, you're pretty international. He did a ton of really blue collar work. So he's not like one of those people who just kind of bounced out of the back of a turnip truck and into a big paying Hollywood job. He's somebody who understands the plight of people who bust their hump for a living. There's just so much to admire in him. And I think he's achieved that level where we talked about how the Superman symbol and Superman himself, you don't really have to read Superman to be familiar with it or to have feelings about it. In a lot of ways, Karloff, even if you can't point him out in a lineup, Frankenstein. And most kids have never seen the Karloff Frankenstein.
Mm-hmm.
But that's when you say Frankenstein, that's what they imagine. It's just it's become so glued to the genetic code of the way that we view that particular monster, the Mummy. I'm always gonna picture the Karloff version of the Mummy, even though there were those really great Brendan Fraser movies, including The Scorpion King. Just right there, that I could imagine that.
Just trying to start fights.
Karloff he's a part of the zeitgeist now, and with that comes a great responsibility, because even though people might have this tangential understanding of who this man was, you're right, we are responsible for keeping this part of that conversation going, keeping this part of his story alive.
Well, what worked for me in terms of really appreciating Karloff as a performer was, after being familiar with his horror stuff, being able to see his not horror stuff. By contrast, you could really see the power of his work. And then you kind of bring that back to the monster stuff. It's just absolutely fascinating. And I've been lucky enough to know or meet at least a lot of celebrities. But man, if I had the opportunity to go back in time, Boris Karloff would be really high up on my list. Also for the Screen Actors Guild stuff. Because
Right.
I knew Ed Asner pretty well. And he was an organizer for them and a lot of other things. And I was almost in SAG, but I had dropped my membership in AFTRA before they merged. So that was a stupid move.
Well, I want to kind of talk about comics a little bit, and we've talked about this Kickstarter and where it's going to go and all the crazy things. So Jack said comics will break your heart if you let it, and that's a phrase everybody in comics hears over and over again. You know, nobody's in comics for the money. What is, if you guys
Actually, nobody ever hears the "if you let it" part.
I always make sure I say it.
That's right. That's right.
I'm very
good, Kelly. Very good.
I am very particular in adding that whenever I say it. But what's the most fun that you've had working in comics? Like, you guys have been doing some crazy stuff lately, especially. What's the most fun? You're like, I can't believe I'm doing this. This is the coolest thing.
I hate to say this because it's like picking your your favorite child. But this is kind of, I guess, skirting the question. My favorite was when I had become serious about making comics, but not so serious that I wanted to make it my source of income.
Mm-hmm.
It was just like, oh, I want to make better comics. So I had a handful, like 3 or 4 friends who had similar interests in making comics, and that was when, this is more than a decade ago, when I started really studying how comics are made. I was making comics before that, but I was really studying like page composition and getting better at lettering. Like some of these early things that I did, like, we didn't know how to letter or anything. So when you look at them, they're terrible to look at now because it breaks all the rules of comic book lettering, and like the paneling is all discombobulated. Even though I was a lifelong reader of comics, you find when you're making comics, you kind of lose that part of you that feels like it really understands comics, and you're just kind of bungling your way through it. So it was with this group of people that we started making things together, and the agreement was we would just make stuff, horror anthologies typically, because that was the easiest thing to make, and we were all into horror. But we'd make these horror anthologies, and then we would all kick in money to pay to get it printed. And then we would make like 200 copies. And then we would try and sell them at conventions and stuff like that. But no one ever asked for their money back. No one ever asked for like a page rate, or like, we just knew it was our financial suicide pact. We're going to make these comics out of the passion of doing it. And that's just going to be the way that things go. And it was through doing that, and with that same kind of mentality, that I got together with Noah Bailey, and that's where Tremor Dose came from. We started making that with that same kind of thought. Hey, we're just going to make this thing, pay to make some copies, and then sell them at shows. But it was through that grind that I ended up sitting across the table from Chip Mosier, who's doing Distillery now and was at the time doing Comixology Originals. And I showed him some pages, and he was like, whoa, that's weird. Like, I've never seen anything like that before. And I was like, well, for a guy like you who works in comics and has worked in comics for a long time to say that, surely you've got to place your publisher for me, right? And he kind of laughed it off. And I just was like stone-faced. I think you should do it.
Chip's a good guy.
Yeah, he was the guy who kind of gave me my first legitimate break, and it was based off that financial suicide pact with friends. And for those of you out there who are interested in making comics, I really think that's the way to do it. I know that there's like the big conversation, you hear people all the time say, hey, don't do any work for free. And I certainly back that when you're working with a company or somebody who's got money. But when it's just you and your friends, don't worry about the money. Just
Right.
go do your job, make your thing, because that's gonna be the entirety of your resume. Resume will be those things that you made because you couldn't help but make them, because you had to make them. So
Hear,
I
hear.
encourage you to do that. I've moved past that. Now I look for a big check, back
Right.
end,
Of course.
royalty, right? Yeah. No, I still do dumb stuff for free all the time, and I always will. Those of you out there who want somebody to show up and do free work, I'm a sucker. Hit me up. I might do it if it sounds cool enough. Yeah, so that's maybe like my fond memory of and funnest project working in comics was before it mattered, before I had somebody looking over my shoulder, before I had a readership that extended beyond a handful of close friends. Those were the fun times.
Comics is part of show business. I mean that quite literally. If you don't have your heart invested in it, you're not going to make it through the day. And the only way you can get that type of investment is to start off on your own, to prove to people that you can do it while you take their criticism and their comments and make your stuff better and better. And then at a certain point in time, with a little bit of luck, you'll pop. But the hardest thing for an editor to do is listen to some guy pitch you a story that sounds really good, but you don't know if he can deliver, let alone know where you're going to publish it. But still, you want them to deliver. And by publishing on their own, they have something they can show you. It's easier for an artist because, pretty pictures. As long as they know how much work went into making those pretty pictures, you're doing okay. Writers, it's hard because you got to sit down and read something if you want to give this person work. So,
and writers, you can draw too. You can draw. People say all the time, "I can't draw." No, I can't draw. Like I spend, when I decided I wanted to make comics, I realized, you can't just tap on someone like Kelly's DMs and be like, "Hey, dude, you want to come do an image pitch with me?" Because they get that all the time from everybody. Everyone thinks that they can just show up and like sell a book to Image, become rich, and Kelly is going to come along and get 20% ownership of it or something like that. Even though Kelly is going to be the one
back
who's
end pay.
Yeah, do it. Yeah, we'll see if you make any money on the back end there. But I realized that that's not how comics are done. I have to either be friends with somebody who's willing to do me a friendly, or I have to draw it myself. So I kind of boot camped myself to get to a point where I could draw enough so that you can tell what's being communicated in the story. Because I did realize, editors, they aren't gonna, my script is always gonna read, it's not gonna have any life to it. I can sit down and I can draw something that hopefully will convey the type of energy that I'm trying to put into the story.
When we started First Comics, I had a goal, this agenda. And, part of that was to bring in really good new talent. And some of the new talent I brought in as writers were actors, stage actors who knew how to block, who knew how to position themselves and other people on a stage in order to tell a story. John Ostrander, Del Close, people like that were brought in, and they did a wonderful job. John still does. And it's critical because it's hard to teach visual thinking. You got to kind of know it, you got to kind of grow up with it, and then realize, oh, wait, I've seen that, I can do that this way. And then, of course, you wind up doing it your own way, but at least you have a starting point.
Yeah, and I think if you at least as writers out there who want to work with artists, at first, at least kind of do a rough thumbnail of what you're asking the artist to do. Just so that you know that it's possible. I think I've got friends who will send me scripts to kind of give them notes on somewhat routinely, and you see even people who have been writing for a long time put multiple actions in a single panel. Just these things, because you aren't thinking, you're just typing, you're trying to tell the story, and you realize, oh, I'm asking for impossible things here. I'm sure I did it to Kelly, and he's probably tucked away behind his beard, being like, Michael did that a bunch of times in the Karloff scripts. But it's something that, and part of that's out of repetition of writing a lot of comics, writing more comics than anyone will ever read, and paying a lot of attention now when I do read comics to see these unique and powerful ways that people are able to convey things. There's a million different ways to create a comic page and to communicate an action, and it's outstanding to me when you see a new way, when you see a new like I remember with Fraction's Hawkeye comic with David Aja, just blowing me away with like, oh, these tiny little panels of somebody like slowly saying cool, and you just see their mouth moving. I remember thinking, wow, that's so cool. Or hyper zooming in on things, or showing thought bubbles where it's basically like an emoji of what they American Sign Language being incorporated into the comic. There's so many cool, outlandish things that went into that comic, and it's honestly surprising to me that comics don't do more of that we don't take bigger chances. But that's where something like a place like Gold Key in a book like Boris Karloff, we can do these things. We aren't in the mainstream. We're like mainstream adjacent. We can get experimental with it. And I hope to do it more and more as we go on.
It was horrible when we only had a handful of publishers. And then, because Marvel did Marvel and DC did DC and Archie did Archie and Harvey did Harvey. And that was pretty much it, except for what Archie Goodwin was doing over at Warren. There was no way or place to experiment. And very few people, since the industry was really in horrible shape, as always, people were hesitant to break the mold. Well, forget it. We're giving birth to brand new human beings every minute of the day, and each and every one of them broke the mold to get there. So we should be telling them stories that respect that.
Yeah.
Well, and that's kind of, to me, that's what First was doing. That's when you got things like Grimjack and John Seymour Freelance and American Flag, where they weren't what you could ever get from DC or Marvel. Like you could, like maybe now they might think about doing something like that, but at that point they never entered their consciousness that it could be in a comic. So I think we went through a period where you could do some of that stuff over at DC. Lord knows that's why they brought me back into DC, was to do that type of stuff with the Question and Green Arrow and other things like that. But it's a flimsy business, and the smaller publishers that are willing to experiment don't have a pile of cash to back up into. So it's really hard for writers and artists to earn a living. But they got to in order to produce the work. So
yeah, and we see, and I guess there's a reason for this, why how styles develop at major publishers, and it's because they want some uniformity to the brand or something like that. But I just never excited me. I'm really thankful that I grew up during a dynamic period in comics where there was even at the mainstream level, there were options in terms of style. Like I had to grow into Sienkiewicz, believe it or not. Like I didn't show up and be like, "Oh, Sienkiewicz is amazing." Like as I matured, my appreciation of Sienkiewicz caught up with where I should have been. Similarly, I was reading tons of Vertigo stuff early on. That like I was just too young to get it. Uh, I remember thinking, what would be really sick is if they would bring in like Todd McFarlane to draw Sandman. Like I really thought that would be a good idea.
I'm sure I thought the same thing at some point, but yeah. Good thing
See,
that never happened.
so it's an interesting person we're bringing up, but like for me, so I remember when Todd broke in, and I remember Infinity Inc. and just really digging what he was doing when he came in there, but he was tamped down by the inker, and I don't mean that in a bad way. It fit with the book. When he went to Marvel and he was not inked that way anymore and was able to express himself, he really did, and he blew up. But you knew Todd at the time, right, Mike?
Yeah, we gave him some of his first work over at First, but
And Mark Silvestri did stuff at First too.
yeah, but that was a favor to me. We had Gene Day had just died in the middle of a job for me. I'm laughing, but it's not funny. And Mark came in to save my ass.
That was on the special, right?
Yeah. I like the Image guys a lot. They're not a publisher.
Right.
The Image guys that you think of, it's sort of a publishing co-op, and I think that that's cool. If you can make that work. I understand, Michael, your comments about Bill Sienkiewicz. I mean, one of my great regrets, because I love Bill's work. I love Bill, but was his storytelling, which he doesn't really do much of anymore, hardly any. And I keep on thinking, like, oh, come on, do some storytelling. And then I see his latest portrait of somebody, which he puts all over the internet, and they're fabulous. They're wonderful. No, I want to see more of that. The problem with artists is that they only have two hands.
And most of them, one of their hands is kind of dumb and isn't good for much.
That is true.
I've seen videos of some fools who use both hands when they're drawing, and I want to get with them. If they can do two pages at a time,
we can overachievers.
Wally Wood did that in a Mad Comics story in the 50s. That was never reprinted in the paperbacks because the paperbacks were in black and white. And this story was about 3D comics. It wasn't in 3D, but they mimicked 3D. And Woody drew his caricature of himself as the artist drawing the 3D books. And he had one blue hand and one orange hand. And it was just hilarious.
That's how 3D works.
See, you didn't know.
That's it. Only schizophrenics can do 3D comics.
So Kelly, what's we didn't get your favorite story. I want to hear yours. What's your most fun you've had making comics?
Oh.
And I know I understand what Mike was saying about picking your favorite child and stuff like that.
Sure. I think I always try to find something to enjoy, no matter what it is, because it's a comic and you're going to be stuck doing it for a little while. Especially with the long form stuff, I'm very adamant about, like, I got to find something that makes this fun for me or whatever. But, like, I think the two things that come to mind for me are when I originally did comics, when I was I don't know, 15, 16, something like that, and it was just Xerox mini comics, and I did them with various friends, and we would just each do a story. And I worked at a comic shop with a photocopier, so we would just, put them out there, and it was all pretty cheap and free. And we did that for a number of years. Like, there was at least 10 different comics probably. But then I kind of stopped for just comics altogether, drawing them for a little while. And then when I came back to it, and then for the first time thought about the fact that it was possible that I could maybe do it in a larger scale. Like, I got with a friend who, Christian Sager, and we did The Cabinet, which is a historical fiction horror graphic novel we did. We did Kickstarter, and then eventually SourcePoint Press picked it up and, kept printing it. But that was a lot of fun for me, because that was my first, it's not a short comic, like this is, 100-something pages. And it was fraught with problems, just in terms of I almost died during the course of it, and so
that's a problem.
And
it's funny.
It's a little stumbling block, but
well, I'm still here, so whatever.
Yeah.
But it's still fun for me to think about the fact that there was so much that tried to get in the way of that book getting done, but like that holding it and seeing it for the first time, and just, it was awesome, and
Sure.
it felt really good. The only other thing I would say is my first, I guess, pro gig, whatever, was I drew Justin Jordan's story in a Eerie issue, and that for me was like, that was like starting at the top,
Sure.
because I'm like, I never in a million years would have thought I drew something in Eerie, and then I followed that up with like a pin-up in Creepy or something. But like, that I even got to work on those, and this was like right when they were stopping. Like, after
Right.
that pin-up was in Creepy, that was it.
Right.
So I like barely like managed to eke in there, but so that was like super exciting, and it's still, in fact, at C2E2, I just recently, somebody asked me for something. They were asking if I had any more trades of Bountiful Garden, so I was like digging through some boxes, and I found a copy of that Eerie issue, and like, I still get excited when I see it. Like, it's
That's
still
great.
super mad to me that I got to do that.
And you should. And you should. It's scary to decide to get on that high wire, because that's your life. This is what you're doing. What do you do when you grow? What are you going to be doing when you grow up? Well, I'm not going to grow up. I'm going into comics.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
still scary.
I didn't go as my job, I guess, source of income, until after our daughter had graduated high school, and it just kind of worked out that way. The job I had at the time, they sold off and closed down, and I got laid off. So I was in the middle of The Cabinet, and my wife and I talked about it, and we're like, there's probably not going to be a better time than now. I was just already in my late 30s or something, maybe, and mid 30s. And I'm 46 now, so every year I feel like anytime I can get a book to come out, I really accomplish something. Because I feel like the older I get, like, I've already noticed that I've slowed down a lot and stuff, so you just worry about that shit like all the time.
Sure.
Sorry, I don't know.
Joe Kubert got into the business when he was 14. He needed to earn a living. It was the Depression. But he really wanted to be in comics. And you'd look at his stuff. I mean, his first features that he signed were when he was 15. And his stuff was crude, but you could absolutely see the potential. I mean, you knew that someday he'd figure out how to draw a horse. He had the horse in the right place, and it was exciting, it was dynamic, and it moved the story the way it was supposed to move. Then you have guys who just, maybe they read comics as a kid, and by guys I no longer mean just guys, and okay, cool, this is my living, I'm going to go and do this, and I'm going to be great at it. I don't have that type of self-confidence, but I sure as hell admire those who do, because they're making that dedication, and they're making it to themselves.
Yeah, I don't know that type of confidence ever really exists. I think I've been watching this show called Atlanta a lot recently. I just finished it. I don't know if you've ever watched it. It's brilliant.
I'm not, but it's one of the things I need to get to. I know that.
Yeah, I've seen the first, I don't know, is it a season? I guess it's a season. I don't know. Yeah.
So Donald Glover plays this guy who's he's like managing his cousin who's having like this breakout rap career. That was kind of the elevator pitch that I heard, which is probably why I never watched it. It just didn't sound like whatever. Like it sounds fine. When I got around to watching it, I see like, oh, this is actually a very surreal show, and there's a lot going on, and it takes such risks. There's entire episodes where it doesn't feature a single member of the principal cast, where it seems totally like a non sequitur, and then 2 years later in another season, it pays off this thing that they planted in season. It's just a brilliant show. It's got elements of Twin Peaks to it that I enjoy quite a bit. But in that show, and this isn't spoiling anything, one of the characters talks about how spite is a great motivator for them. You know, it's a character that went to Princeton and ultimately ended up leaving before receiving their degree. And he says so much of his pursuit of success is out of spite to the people that told him that he was a fool for leaving school. And I think about that all the time. Like, the moral of this thing is that spite shouldn't be your great motivator, because it can lead to these other problematic elements in your character. But I will say, like, as somebody who's been fueled by spite for a number of years, people saying like, oh, you're never going to do this or you're never going to do that. It's a great motivator to go ahead and do it, and to be willing to throw yourself into the wall again and again and again, and just keep getting up and throwing yourself in at the wall until you realize that wall doesn't even really exist. Like, I created this wall between me and what I think I wish to be doing and what I could be doing and what I think my goals are. You created that wall. It's an illusion. You're beating yourself up over nothing. So that's when you transcend the spite. That's also when you realize, this thing isn't to feed my ego either, because I've already like beat myself up so much that I know my personal self-worth can no longer be defined by success in a medium. It's judged on a different thing entirely now, and it's mysterious even to me sometimes. I'll have a comic come out where people will be like, this sucks, this is the worst comic I've ever read, but I'll be secretly like, oh, that's the one that I love, that's the one I'm proud of. And I'll be happy unaffected, but trying to channel that moving forward, the more that I can hold on to that. And really what it takes is, especially with creator-owned stuff, if you and the people that you're working with are so dedicated to this cause and so in love with the material, then you become this weird little cult of just a handful of people. So when people say, hey, this isn't any good, or people on Goodreads give you 1 star or whatever, you just laugh at it. You're like, they can't get on our level. They can't see our vision. They can't understand what we've done. I think that's where the best and most meaningful creative stuff comes from. That's why David Lynch doesn't like to explain the meaning of his stuff, because it means like trying to qualify it to somebody who hasn't tried to qualify it to themselves.
Yes, it's possible that he deliberately does not know.
I don't think he knows. I think until he's up, he doesn't know what he's doing. Doesn't stop it from being amazing.
It's deliberate.
Yep.
It's deliberate, and that's a high wire act of a whole different type.
Yeah, it's almost like you got to be David Lynch to do David Lynch type stuff.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're just me. Just ripping them off.
Part of that's 100%. I mean, most of what you just said is true in the way that you need to be yourself and trust yourself. And that can be manifested in a million different ways. I posted a picture yesterday. I think I read 17 comics yesterday that came out in the last 2 weeks. Ooh. And they are vastly different, and yet almost to a T, everyone was enjoyable in a certain way. To some were better than others, obviously, but some were. Almost everyone had something interesting that you could tell that someone had something to say. Even the most benign. Well, I didn't really read very benign ones, but there's always something that somebody's trying to say, and the key as a reader is to try and open yourself to what's being said.
Right.
And the thing about being a creator is telling your story, and being open with what you wanted to say and saying it.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's called being a good reader or a good viewer of a movie. When you ask yourself, even if it's not for you,
there are plenty of books.
Is this accomplishing what I imagine the creative team wanted to do? Because by that metric, my little opinion doesn't matter. Whether it's for me or not doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. What matters is, was this successful toward the achievement of a vision? More often than not, I've got letterboxed with the new year just so I could keep forget what movies I watched. Man, I rank everything super high. Like everything's above 3 stars because I respect the work.
Because you know where to go. You know what to avoid. It's also, I know creators who are not as passionate about freedom of speech, freedom of expression, as some other folks are. And I never understood that, because you're in the freedom of expression business. And
that's a weird, I guess I don't pay attention to other creators.
I'm sorry? Kelly, I didn't hear that.
It's like one of the forefronts of it, even.
Oh, absolutely.
It I don't understand how you can make comics and be like, well, we just don't need to talk about anything.
Earth. The place where most of us live.
Not all.
Oh, no. I've been in this business too long.
Got some blowback over months ago. Got some blowback over some Wonder Woman stuff that we did that had feminist undertones. They said.
Listen,
it's Wonder Woman.
Yeah, it's like you do know what book you're picking up, right?
When you guys got the Wonder Woman gig, I'm like, I mean, in my mind, I'm like, there's going to be blowback. I don't know what it's going to be, but there's somebody's going to be upset with something you write, and I knew that going into it. I mean, if you guys didn't, I'm sorry, but but again, you guys did a great job.
Hey, thanks.
Go ahead.
Wonder Woman's one of those characters where no matter what you do, you're going to get compared to one of 3 runs. That will be like that reader's favorite run. Mm-hmm. And those 3 runs are all amazing, but they already exist, and you can't really do that again.
Right.
It'll be like, oh, cool, you're doing like your version of Greg Rucka or Gail Simone or George Perez. Like you're doing one of those 3 things. Beyond that, Wonder Woman's got the same challenges around her that every character of her stature has. Only it's turned up even more because it's Wonder Woman. It's a female character, and female characters in comics face the same type of scrutiny that women in the real world do. Which is there's people who just want to see her bouncing around in a crop top, and then there's other people who want to have her do something meaningful, and then there's people who are politically agnostic. And it's like, man, with bringing Becky and I onto that, I think they knew that they weren't going to get this like hard-hitting political diatribe, but they had to know, like, oh, we have a responsibility if we're writing Wonder Woman. We have to touch on these,
and you can.
Yeah.
There's no reason why you can't do all of that stuff as long as you're telling a story. Let me tell you something. One of the most fun experiences, meaningful experiences I ever had in the comics business was when the lights went up after the first Wonder Woman movie. And I did this on purpose. I was there with my daughter, and I was looking at all of the girls who were like, 6, 8, 10 years old, whose moms brought them to see Wonder Woman on the screen. And after the movie, these kids were entranced. They'd never seen a woman do that on screen before, and it validated them. These little girls, and that was a gift to humanity, as far as I was concerned. It empowered people who have a hard time being empowered. So you can do that.
Yeah.
That's why you're telling stories. And by the way, I'm reading your Wonder Woman tonight.
Awesome. Well, hopefully you weren't offended by the subtle feminist undertones.
Oh, yeah.
I'd be afraid if they weren't there.
The idea that it's feminist undertones in a book about a woman is hilarious.
Right. Absolutely right. Absolutely right. Hello. You look at the first story, that very first story, which was a prose story in the back of All-Star Comics, back just as the war was starting, right before, and it was very political. It was very feminist at that time in 1942, 1941. It's always been that way. When it wasn't, like when Bob Kanigher was doing it, okay. But that's who Wonder Woman is.
And we have had our Bob Kanigher depreciation moment of the show.
That's right. I got to put one in every show. It's in my contract.
So this Kickstarter ends. Which do we know what day? Do we remember exactly? I know it's like 10 days. Let's see if I can grab it. So this Kickstarter, it's running on the bottom, so people can get it there. It's in the comments. It ends in 9 days on April 27th, next Thursday at 10 p.m. It has 567 backers, and I wanted to see it get to 600. I want to see it get to 700 backers. So we guys gotta push through this, and everybody go out there, get behind this, get this book, because I can't wait to get it in my hands, to be honest with you. And
me neither, and not because of all the reasons why I just said I was looking forward to it. I want to see it because I'm looking forward to a good comic book.
Cool. I hope that we deliver that. I feel really confident that we have delivered that. Like I say, I haven't seen it all put together yet. I've seen all the art. I've read all the scripts. I'm super excited to see it all put together and bound and doing its
You know,
thing.
today with talent of your generation, it's a whole new thing. It may be a book that was around for 97 issues. Am I right about that? But it's also a new thing. I'm looking forward to it.
I'm kind of interested in what like the TikTok generation is going to think when we have this reveal of Karloff in there. Like, if they're like, okay, there's an old dude, like neat.
Then don't do a Montana convention because now TikTok is illegal in Montana.
Oh no! What are they? How is the Chinese government going to get access to their data now? We really fooled the Chinese government in Montana.
You can read all about it at Pop Culture Squad. Was my column that Bob ran yesterday, right?
Yep.
And that's what I'm babbling about.
Excellent. I'm gonna do that.
Yeah, it's you should, it is my line about Mike's column yesterday was that the whip is cracking and Mike's raising the volume on so you can hear it if you can't hear it. Yeah, it's pretty good.
That's why I'm here.
The other part about Montana that I always loved, my favorite factoid about Montana is there are more deer in Montana than people.
Whoa.
There aren't a lot of people. I did a great convention in Billings, and I got to hang out with Stan Line, and I wound up editing his autobiography. So I have very fond memories of comics and Montana.
Kelly, you were going to say something.
Michael, did you? I assume you did, but did you go back and read any of the old comics when you were getting ready for this?
I did, and I watched a lot of the TV show.
Right.
Because there was a moment where I thought, oh, and it ended up being, this was like one of those initial dumb ideas where I was like, what if we incorporated some of the story elements from past issues? They kind of brought them back as like did a whole issue where there was a story about somebody exorcising a ghost from their house or, sending a ghost away from their house. And I wanted to do a story where it was like you shoo the ghost out of the house, but it just goes over to the neighbor's house. And that causes like a Hatfield and McCoy type of feud where they're constantly pushing this ghost back and forth.
Nice. Well, why didn't I do that?
We should. What are we doing this convoluted crap for? We do all that.
Yeah, I
had
got
a lot.
A collected just a bunch of whatever, one of the Dark Horse collected ones, which were a lot harder to find than I expected. But I got a hold of one and I read the first few stories and I was like, okay, so, because at this point I already knew what we were doing. So I was like, oh, okay, so this is useless.
Kelly, whereabouts do you live?
I'm in Arkansas.
Ah! Oh, okay. I know Michael's from Austin? In Austin?
I was in Austin. I grew up in New England, and then I lived in the Bay Area of California for a bunch of years. Then I moved to Austin, and now I'm in Portland.
Ah!
See,
I am a huge barbecue Texas brisket and blues guy. So I have a strong affinity for Austin. I would like to see it move to another state.
Yeah, it's definitely a little blue dot, and it's becoming weird. So we left Austin summer of last year, and it was still it was still weird. It was still Austin, but we were seeing a real big influx of like Elon Musk moved a bunch of his operations there.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden you've got
God, you needed that.
and they're excited because hey, we get to live in weird Austin, but they don't realize that it's them showing up that really was killing music. Like they talk about how Austin is like the music capital of the world, but because of the new like zoning laws, like you can't have outdoor music after sunset. You can't do this. You can't do that. So it's like
You're kidding.
yeah, it's really changed the complexion of Austin. Furthermore,
I never heard of zoning laws in Texas.
well, welcome to Austin, where now it's under the rule of the Tesla Corporation. Yeah, it's really strange. I still love Austin. Look forward to visiting. Glad I don't live there anymore.
There you go.
That's fair.
There you go.
Well, guys, it's 10
You in
o'clock.
Montana, Madman Mike Gold?
I'm sorry?
Are you in Montana?
Me? No. I'm in Connecticut, which is just like Montana, but bizarro.
Do they still not sell beer on Sundays?
No, they sell beer.
Okay, thank you.
They don't sell beer. In the county I live in, Maryland, there's no alcohol sales on Sundays.
They don't sell it where I live on Sunday.
This is criminal. Sunday is when you need it the most.
Well, actually, so the liquor stores do not sell alcohol on Sundays. They're closed. But if you are a tavern, you can sell alcohol. So there are liquor stores that have a small bar in the back that are considered taverns, so they get around. They charge more in general, so you only go there on Sundays because that's the only place open if you forgot to get beer on Saturday.
There's the state line, like Missouri, is just down the street from me, and when I did drink, that was Sunday.
You got to run to the state line. Oh my goodness! It's
It
like
always
SLC
cost
milk.
more. It was the only time I'd go out there, and that was only if I, forgot or
Right.
before. People still do it. So
You make do.
Okay,
All
thank
right.
you so much for having us. And yeah, people who were sitting on the fence about the Kickstarter, you got 9 days to get off the fence. Be on the right side of history. Support what we're doing. Like I say, the additional money is just going to get put into taking bigger risks and giving us room to dream with future projects so that we can show up and we can make sure that we've got the right talent and that they're being presented in the way that is most suitable for their work. We don't have to follow the same type of old rules and structures of most publishers. We can get away with a lot, we can do a lot, and we hope to do that. And the best way to do that is to back us now, back us early and hard as you can. So do check out that link to the Kickstarter sometime in the next 9 days. If it's something that you can help us out with, we'll help you out by giving you a cool comic that'll keep you happy. Yeah, we're gonna stay unshaven. I gotta trim this thing down. Kelly's never cut his. Look at that.
nah.
Well,
I don't want
So-
to do.
I do want to, before you guys go, I want to let everybody know who's watching still that Mike and I will be at Ithacon this weekend on Ithaca College. It is the nation's second longest running comic convention from April 22nd to the 23rd at Emerson Suites on Ithaca College campus. Tickets are available on ithacon.org. And we're going to have Mike Gold there. Jamal Leigel's going to be there. Glenn Whitmore, Roger Stern, as I said. The folks from Ahoy are going to be there. Wave Blue World is going to be there. JC Vaughn from Overstreet Price Guide is going to be there. There'll be cosplaying. There'll be anime. There'll be a whole bunch of other kids panels and activities. It's $20 for the weekend for both days for adults. Kids 7 to 17 are $5, and kids 6 and under are free. Tickets are available at ithacon.org. So that's what we're doing.
If you're 18, you could just say you're 17.
I didn't say that. You didn't. That didn't come from me.
This is a
But,
life.
I
but then
understand.
you can't buy beer.
If you're a young-looking adult, you might be able to say that you're 7 years old. get it at the discounted rate.
Exact. Listen, I'm not. I don't condone these things.
Bob's gonna sneak you in the back door if you meet him by the dumpster.
That might happen.
Gentlemen, this was terrific. I'm really looking forward to your book.
Thank you.
I enjoy both of you, the work both of you have done. So this is something, take the tethers off. I'm there.
Thank you so much. I look forward to after the book comes out. We're going to come back on. The same crew will get together.
Yes.
And if you don't like it, you have to spend like 2 hours telling us about what you don't like about it.
Okay, I'm a trained editor. I can do that.
All right, I take that offer back, but we will get back together and we'll talk some more about what else is coming up for Karloff, and indeed what else is coming up over at Gold Key, because I got some insight over there.
Great.
Love to hear about it.
We're excited. Thanks a lot, guys.
All right, guys.
Thank you.
Talk to you soon.
Take it easy. Another one.
Yeah, it was good. So we're
That
gonna
was
be
fun.
there.
It was great fun.
It was good fun. We don't have our next guest set up, but we're gonna find that out in the next few days or so. And stay tuned to popculturesquad.com and to our Facebook page and Twitter pages, and you'll find out what's gonna happen and when we're gonna be there. What else you got?
Nothing. I got dinner downstairs. I'm going for it.
All right. Well, I'm going to play our outro, and I'll see you soon.
All right. Take it
Bye,
easy.
guys.
This has been a production of the Pop Culture Squad Network. PopCultureSquad.com. How do you nerd?